Hey, Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. And on this show, I'd love to talk about different categories on Kickstarter. I'm a really inquisitive, curious guy. So whenever I see success, I'm always like, what happened? What did those people do? And I'm just talking about like financial success, right? Financial success is amazing and it's great. And like, we obviously need to have funding to be able to create and do cool new stuff. But there's a layer deeper there, I think, where it comes with success in terms of connecting with an audience, right? And doing something beyond yourself, doing something where other people take notice and you can be proud of this. It goes beyond just making a bunch of money or getting a lot of funding, which is of course nice, but it's really about making meaning your mantra. And I think today's episode by Deepwater Games, where they raised over $338,000 on Kickstarter, they attracted more than 2,900 backers, and they were able to create something that I think is really freaking cool in the tabletop game space, is just inspiring. You're going to hear on today's episode as well some of the things that they like doing that's kind of a byproduct of tabletop games, which is bringing people together, creating that community feel. And community is something we don't really think too much about, I think, when we're thinking about business. But whether it's a physical product, a gadget, a gizmo, something that you've invented, or it's a game, a comic book, a film project, anything that you're trying to do on Kickstarter, community is so important because this is different from just buying a product, right? This is different from just going down to the local store, getting a product there. If you're going to like a board game store, or you're going to just, electronics store, or you're buying something on Amazon, right? Or eBay. This is different from that, man. This is crowdfunding, and crowdfunding is all about the community. So you're gonna hear a lot about that on today's episode, as well as some of the hacks and tricks that this team used in order to engage their community and also in order to get rapidly funded with their incredible campaign. The other thing that I want to mention here is if you're a newcomer to the episode, you're a newcomer to my podcast, first of all, welcome. Always appreciate rating and reviews on iTunes if you do enjoy this show. In addition, if you just kind of want to skip this and Sal, I don't want to listen to you talk and have a conversation and hear about all the stories and stuff like that. Just give me the info, right? You can always go and check out my book, my audiobook, The Kickstarter Launch Formula, which you can check out at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. That's crux.com/Kickstarter audio, crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audience. Kickstarter audio. So if you're like a no nonsense person and you're like, you know what, I don't want to listen to all these people talk back and forth, I'm not interested in that kind of stuff, just give me it as it is. Tell me what to do. Let me just copy your blueprint, right? That's really where you want to go, is crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. You can download the Audible version of the Kickstarter launch formula. It's a plug and play formula for you to get a project funded on Kickstarter. And you can literally just copy those techniques and employ them, and you will see results. If you're more interested in the story and also to, I think, tap into the inspiration of this episode, stay tuned, my friend, because it's coming up right after this. If you're worried about the fulfillment and shipping part of your Kickstarter campaign when it comes to getting out all those perks and rewards to your backers, rest assured I've put together a complete Kickstarter fulfillment and shipping checklist for you, and it's free. This is sponsored by the folks at Fulfillrite, and they thought that you should have this checklist as part of your arsenal going into a crowdfunding campaign. If you want to get instant access to this checklist and it's free, you can go to fulfillrite.com/checklist. Again, that is fulfillrite.com/checklist. Fulfillrite.com/checklist. Just go to that link and you can download it immediately. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Today we have a smash success on the show for Rat Queens to the Slaughter. Sisters, Warriors, Queens, Friends to the Very End. This is by Deepwater Games. Project has done phenomenally well. Nearly 3,000 backers, over 300K that's been raised. You can hear a lot of really great tips and advice on today's show. We have the community manager, Whitcombe, here with us. Super privileged to meet you. Welcome.
Hello. It's a pleasure to be here.
Definitely. Maybe we could get started. You could just introduce to the listeners a bit about the project and just kind of fill them in there.
Absolutely. So Rat Queens to the Slaughter went on to Kickstarter on July 13th of 2021 when we went ahead and did it for 3 weeks. So it wrapped up at, like you mentioned, a little over $300,000. We hit 338K. We almost hit 3,000 backers. And this isn't the first Kickstarter that we've done. I'm with Deepwater Games, and like our previous most successful Kickstarter have been Fantastic Factories, specifically the expansions for Fantastic Factories. And that one hit, it just barely broke 300 last year. So this seems to be like where we're hitting right now, where we're trying to find that Kickstarter that helps us break 500,000. But we were really happy with how this one went. It was definitely growth, even over Fantastic Factories. And that one we were absolutely thrilled by last year.
And what was your role, or what is your role in these different projects that are being launched?
So as the community manager for the company, I do a lot of our outward facing brand. So I handle our social media, I handle a lot of our customer service, I'll handle all of our community interaction when it comes to, like, for example, running our Discord, dealing with the local community and arranging stuff like that. For example, our company is hosting a comic convention on September 25th next month locally. We're trying to start up a local in Michigan Comic-Con to go ahead and start growing all of the nerdy facets around us too.
Very cool.
But yeah,
I
do a lot of that stuff. As far as the actual Kickstarter itself goes, most of my interaction is in like the helping work with the marketing team in order to line up some of the marketing and social media campaigns that we have planned for throughout and before a Kickstarter as well. At the end of the day, like Rat Queens, as far as our work goes, did not start on July 13th when the Kickstarter launched. Obviously, there are months and months of preparation that go into being able to make something that breaks $300,000.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And did you start working with the company since the very beginning, or have you been working with them since a couple of games back? When did you start working with them?
I was one of the earliest hires for Deepwater Games itself. Our history and like how the company came to be is a little messier than most board game publishers. We're actually part of an umbrella company, Oxeye Media. And Oxeye Media owns a board game publisher, an artist collective, a comic and book publisher as well. Oxeye Media has released a movie before. So Deepwater Games is one of the younger branches of an overall network. SourcePoint Press is the oldest branch, and it has existed in some shape or form for about a decade now. But Deepwater Games, that leg of the company, has only existed for about 3.5 so far. And I was brought on about 6 months into the company's existence.
And for you, how do you kind of get your fingers on the pulse with understanding and getting to know a community of players? What do you do to really get to know them? And are you a player yourself?
I'm definitely a player myself. Before I even started working on the publishing side of things, I was a board game retailer for about half a decade. I ran a couple of different board game and comic shops and tabletop shops throughout Michigan for a few years. So because of that, that's a big part of why I was brought onto the company. I had my finger very close to the pulse because I was getting to literally host gaming events multiple times a week. And I was the one that was actually selling your board games to customers face to face. And there's definitely a lot of strong points that come from having somebody on the team that has like that retail experience directly in the industry. But being very online is an important task for any community manager, whether you like that fact or not. Some days it's great. Sometimes you're like, boy, howdy, I wish I could shut down Twitter, but you can't because it's literally your job, you know? But just at the end of the day, I think that with community management, one of the biggest things is people respond well to sincerity and enthusiasm. So if you have a community manager that doesn't really love the things that they're actively surrounding themselves by, it's going to be a pretty easy way to stunt growth. But at the end of the day, customers really respond to honesty, sincerity, and just genuine enthusiasm. And I think those are inherently the most important things you can find in any like community management branch.
Yeah, definitely. So if you have someone come in, let's just say you're in a retail environment, someone comes in the store, they see a board game box that says Rat Queens to the Slaughter, and like, what's that game about? How would you describe that to them?
So, Rat Queens to the Slaughter is going to be a deck building cooperative boss battler. So, Rat Queens, to anybody that's stepped inside of a comic shop before, you might be familiar with the fact that Rat Queens is actually based off of a decade old comic series. The comic series is very rated R. It's got this fabulous, largely cast of women, which you don't get to see a lot in sword and board like fantasy and magic quite nearly as often. It is definitely a very raunchy, very gory series. We tried to go ahead and bring it down to more of like a PG-13 level when we were translating it to tabletop. But at the end of the day, Rat Queens to the Slaughter is a translation of one of my personal favorite comics ever. And you're just going to be playing as the queens from the comic. You're going to take on some of the biggest bosses from throughout the comic. You're going to get upgrade cards that are going to be based off of different things that happen in the comic. So if you're familiar with the franchise, there's this huge depth of like little Easter egg references, like the Betty Climber is a card in the game, and it's based off of like a 2 pages in the comic itself where Betty goes ahead and climbs a giant orc and bounces off of her teammates. One of the big emphasis of Rat Queens to the Slaughter is it's a cooperative game, but more importantly, it really pushes interaction between the different players, because Rat Queens is a story of found family and just what love inside of your friendships can look like throughout all the chaos. So one of the biggest things we wanted to make sure of when we were translating this comic series into a board game was making sure that not only does that like friendship and found family come through, which meant, of course, it was going to be a collaborative game. That decision was easy, but how do we go ahead and create mechanics that don't just force you to interact with each other, that actively make you want to interact with your friends?
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing there, I think, is tabletops do that in general as well. It's just bringing people together, right?
Oh,
So
110%.
I love that aspect. One of the things I was looking at is like you guys have launched so many different campaigns that it's almost surprising. I would think like someone's like, oh, they're just going to launch a campaign and be immediately successful, right? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, part of that is just Kickstarter culture at the end of the day. I know that it's really scary for smaller publishers to get into the game because if you don't fully fund on like the first day, that feels terrifying, right? Because we've built this Kickstarter culture where that's almost become like the status quo, the expectation. So one of the biggest things with us is, of course, like if we're going to play the Kickstarter game, we have to play it well. So that meant making sure that we did a ton of lead up work to make sure we had that strong day one. Like we had over 4,000 followers built up on the campaign before it launched. We even did, this was the first Kickstarter that we ever did where we experimented with a pre-launch stretch. Yeah, that whole day one impact is very coordinated, very intentional. So what we did was for our very first stretch goal, we went ahead and announced this one before the game or before the Kickstarter even launched. And instead of like trying to meet a particular funding goal or anything, we said if the Kickstarter hits 4,000 followers before launch, we will unlock this stretch goal before things even dig in.
That's
And
so
that went
cool.
really
I love that.
well. Yeah, like kind of at the end of the day, you've done so many episodes of this this podcast so far, so you know a lot of the easy ones. And like at the end of the day, stretch goals are obviously like kind of leaning on FOMO, the fear of missing out, and kind of pulling certain heartstrings from a marketing side of things. So why don't we go ahead and pull that same heartstring, go ahead and use that same technique beforehand too? Your
That's
pre-marketing
really
is
interesting.
just as important as your marketing throughout the campaign. And that felt like a swing and a hit right there.
Yeah, I also love just the way you experimented with that. I think a lot of the times we try to do just such like rigid strategies. And you're like, well, this worked here. Why not try it in the pre-launch, right? So I love the way that you also experimented with that. Very cool.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of other campaigns doing it too, and I think that it's great. At the end of the day, from a publisher standpoint, being able to get great pre-marketing done takes so much weight off of your shoulders later on. Obviously a strong pre-launch marketing campaign doesn't mean you just get to phone it in during the campaign itself, but you get more data, you get more information, you get more leads. It is just as important as the during campaign marketing. And that's what we really discovered during Fantastic Factories. I think Fantastic Factories last year was when we started to dig more into pre-campaign. And part of that was the pandemic, that was the first Kickstarter we launched since the pandemic started. And we knew that we wouldn't be on the road. We wouldn't be connecting with people. Before the pandemic, I used to do a lot of demo nights at stores really actively and tried to be a super in their retailer liaison for the company too. And obviously pandemic makes that more challenging. So Fantastic Factories was the campaign where we were like, all right, we're going to actually respect the pre-launch marketing process. And we learned a lot there. And now to me, it is it's 50% of your campaign success in my eyes.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Very cool. So one of the things we've been having on the show more recently, you mentioned with some of the other episodes, is people experimenting with influencer marketing. I think that's just in general, right? With like e-commerce, but definitely in the Kickstarter space, we've been seeing a lot more of that. What has your experience been like with influencer marketing for you guys?
Yeah, I think that in general, the pandemic pushed a bunch of people in this direction in the first place, because all of a sudden, if you're not getting like that word of mouth in person that we got to have in the pre-pandemic world, then you have to get word of mouth in a very different fashion. And influencers are hands down one of the best ways to go ahead and replicate that in the digital. So with Rat Queens, we worked with influencers on a totally brand new level. As far as deep water games goes, a different level than we've ever done before. One of the cool things that comes from Rat Queens being a pre-existing franchise is that, of course, we then have all of this pre-existing interest and a pre-existing community that we can go ahead and lean on a little bit. So one of the coolest things that we got to do with Rat Queens is that we worked with a group called Ripley Improv. And Ripley Improv had in the past gone ahead and done live streams where they cosplayed as the Rat Queens characters and did like D&D campaigns and played board games as them. So we already knew going in that there was a big chunk of the Rat Queens fandom that associated this particular group with Rat Queens, that they would probably be some of the best people to work with. So we did. And it took a lot of months of planning. It took so much more conversation than working with in-industry influencers. Like obviously there are a lot of like board game content creators that are doing a bunch of awesome streaming content, that are doing fantastic like TikToks. I've been having to research influencers in the TikTok realm a lot more for a project that we have coming up. There's so much content going on out there nowadays. And we've worked with a lot of stuff on that level, but we had never worked with anybody on this level. Because what we ended up doing was we worked with Ripley Improv and Easy Allies and Twitch headquarters to go ahead and do a charity stream on the first couple of days of the launch. We had all of the girls go ahead and dress up as go ahead and play as the Rat Queens again, go ahead and do voices as the Rat Queens again. We went ahead and attached ourselves to a charity and raised over $2,000 for the event. But we had them play through the whole entire game. Thank you. We had them play through the whole entire game, and it was on the front page of Twitch because we worked with Easy Allies and they're a bigger network. We had all of the girls go into a studio for the stream and everything. Hands down, like the highest production level thing we've ever done. And it was also probably the most rewarding stream that we've ever gotten to do as a company. It was awesome. But we gave it a lot of time. We talked about it for like 3 months and it went well. On the other hand, I also got to learn that with higher end influence, you need that time to plan things out. Their lives are just as chaotic as you might kind of assume. So some of the last minute stuff that we were trying to do, including even with the writer of the comic, didn't work out. So we definitely didn't give ourselves enough time for the big influencers that we really wanted to deal with, or we weren't as on top of things. The process was not as quick as it is when working with smaller influencers.
I think a lot of older, demographic and people who are more used to the mainstream social media tend to be a little bit hesitant about TikTok just because
Hmm.
we've heard so much, oh, it's a younger crowd, teenagers and stuff. Did you find that to be useful when it was promoting your campaign, or do you have any metrics on that at all?
So we didn't use TikTok at all for Rat Queens. I've been starting to do more research on TikTok because of another Kickstarter that we have later this year that we haven't announced yet. We get to announce it in a couple of weeks, but unfortunately, I can't give any teasers about it right now as much as I'd love to. But that one we're tackling very differently. In fact, last Monday, we went ahead and had an office meeting where we kind of did a post-mortem on Rat Queens, what we felt we did well, what we felt we kind of could have improved on, and how we can translate that into this upcoming Kickstarter. And one of the things that we're doing is we're kind of adjusting some of the influencers that we're working with or how we're budgeting things. So, for example, Rat Queens, we had a pretty big budget on preview videos and everything like that. And partially just because of the way that like media and review consumption is going, we felt like we actually did overkill there, that we probably blew like 30-35% more budget than we needed to on that category, because at the end of the day, people are looking towards other forms of media. So we just kind of overdid it on one form of media instead of respecting the width. We also feared that Rat Queens just wouldn't really have much benefit from TikTok. It's not a fast game, it's a co-op game with a pretty, like, it looks a little more intimidating as far as components go than the actual gameplay is. Everything that Deepwater Games makes is meant to be easy to learn and challenging to master, right? Games with simple mechanics and brilliant depth is what we go for. And we feel like Rat Queens hits that. So it's more intimidating, like visually, than it really is. But regardless, we felt like the short form of TikTok wouldn't translate well to it. Now I do regret a little bit. I wish that I had taken like the budget from one of those big videos and broken up into working with like 5 different influencers from TikTok instead, sort of thing. But we're doing a hard 180 on the next one simply because the game itself is a much different game and lends itself well to shorter videos and smaller, like micro content. But I'm going firm 180. Most of the influencers that we work with on that next campaign are going to be small, like micro content creators instead.
Interesting, interesting. Your job takes a lot of energy, right? And you're doing a lot of different stuff, and you are wearing a lot of hats, and you're interacting with many people. What's your favorite medium to really talk with the fans? Is it Discord when you're in that kind of live chat environment? Is it managing the comment section with your campaigns, or the emails? Like, where do you really like to
Definitely
interact?
not the emails and the comment section. No offense to those.
Or in
But
person,
also maybe a
maybe.
little offense meant. No, it's just usually when people are coming into the comment section or emails, like they do have questions, but a lot of times like they have a problem that you need to solve, right? So that just sets the tone for the interaction. So to me, like customer service type stuff like that will never be as rewarding as my favorite is in-person events at the end of the day. My most rewarding interactions have been, for example, Nolan and I hosted a panel at PAX Unplugged last year, and that was not last year, but the year before that. That was phenomenally rewarding. Getting to demo things to people in person. The first time that we ever demoed Monstrosity was actually at PAX Unplugged 2019 as well, and that is hands down now my favorite game to demo. And conventions are starting to poke back up. Whether we get to see them long term or not kind of depends on how people behave and whether or not we're on top of the way COVID is developing right now. But for now, conventions are back a little bit. And I got to work one for 3 days the other weekend. And just instantly, I remembered like getting to demo and teach the games to people in person, getting to in the moment reform how you're explaining rules to make it be specific to them. It's that level of interaction. It's no wonder I'm a community manager, because that level of community is what really speaks to me. So when we get to do stuff like that, that's the most rewarding part.
Why do you think that's so meaningful?
Probably like honestly like the not just like a generic teaching element, that getting to do like that catered teaching, because we've done streams throughout the last year and a half in order to maintain our community and everything, and we've gotten to host some big games of Welcome to and Floor Plan and stuff, but the digital setting can never really replace some of those in-person interactions. There's something special about like sitting a family down and teaching them a game and like getting to witness firsthand rules clicking for them, or kids giggling at a doodle that they made for Monstrosity. It's just a totally different level.
Did you have any games that you played when you were little that were, made that kind of special significance for you?
Ooh, that's a good question. I did grow up in a pretty heavy board game and just gaming family in general. Lots of traditional card games. I live in Michigan, so euchre was a mandatory one, but spades and hand and foot and all sorts of stuff. But we also did play a lot of board games, and Risk with my uncle was hands down the most formative. So I even remember one time, because eventually the rest of my family just got too bogged down by Risk, which was probably a sign that I was going to go on to appreciate crunchier board games than my family does. But my uncle and I remember, we're 3 hours into a game of Risk and he knows he has to go home. So we literally pulled out a piece of paper and wrote down how many units each of us had and exactly what cards were in our hand. And we packed the game away with that sheet of paper and like a save file. When he came by like a year later, we pulled it out and just restored it to the current board state and continued. He lost his, he passed years ago, but he lost his mind when he found a computer game for Risk. Mm-hmm. So I know that like the current realm of like Tabletopia and Board Game Arena and everything would have blown his mind. He would be so happy to see stuff like that nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, that's the cool element, is like you're able to do something that's challenging, but also do it with people that you care about, right? And it really brings those memories forward as well. So I think that's at the end of the day what you're doing here is building that community, right, around yourself and around other people. And that's super cool. So I just have like one or two more questions for you. One of my questions was, I think it's so intimidating to see so many successes that you guys have had, and to hear you've raised $300K. What kind of advice do you usually give to the beginning creator walks into your shop or up at an event, comes to you and is like, I just want to know, how to get started here? Is it just to begin prototyping and play testing and just keep, hammering it out? What advice do you give to people in that beginning stage?
So it kind of depends on what sort of person you are, right? Like at the end of the day, different techniques are better for different types of motivations. So for me personally, the best thing for me to do is just literally start doing it. And it doesn't matter how chaotic that looks at the very beginning. So for people like me, my advice is just literally go grab a bunch of components and sit down at a table and start writing stuff on pieces of paper. But for a lot of other people, what I've seen be really effective is, because you mentioned it's intimidating, right? So for some people, pretending it's not intimidating and just diving in and doing it is the right answer. That's not the right answer for a lot of people, in which case I think it's time to address and break down how intimidating it is. So in that case, what I like to recommend people do is write out a list of every single step in the process you can think of, right? So step 1 would be prototype the board game. Step 2 would be play test the board game. Step 3 would be make changes and expand play test group. And then write that down all the way through to launch Kickstarter. And some of these steps will be question marks, right? There might be a part of the process where they're like, shoot, I don't actually know how to pursue manufacturing, right? I don't know how to pursue it. I don't know what the steps in it are. Write it out as a big question mark. And then you know exactly which steps of the process you can do now yourself and what you need to research. And you've kind of then made an actionable plan for yourself, right? Including sometimes the action is literally research. Find people that know how to do this, right? It is okay for that to be some of the steps in the process. It's necessary. But that builds a list of what you can do right now, what you're capable of. Because it's so easy to look at the grand process and go, I don't know how to do blank, so I won't do it at all, right?
Yeah, I think that's so important. And the only thing I would add from a coaching angle is put deadlines on it or put it on a calendar. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a big like reward person. So I like to reward myself with those deadlines too. So like if it means like write down next to this deadline, I get to buy myself this book, sometimes that works. If you are a carrot and stick sort of person, give yourself rewards. Do it.
Very well said. Very well said. So one of the other just quick follow-up questions there is, for other people that are just kind of curious about, Kickstarter's landscape in general, you guys have seen it change and transform over the years here and over time. Where do you think it's headed right now? Is this something where there are new techniques that you've noticed at all? Anything you'd like to spot or, talk about related to the ecosystem? Anything that comes to mind there?
Yeah, so some of the things that we learned, I really do think that at the end of the day, micro consumable content is the direction that just content consumption is heading in general. So for example, Rat Queens was our longest Kickstarter video so far. Fantastic Factories, the one before it, was our second longest, and they've had some of the lowest watch percentages, which might really, there are other reasons why it might be, but we're currently considering like, okay, how much does the length of content deter people? We're looking into offering more condensed Kickstarter bodies, like the actual content of what you scroll down as the body of the Kickstarter, just like compounding or compacting, condensing information for people, respecting the fact that if it is true, and if it is true that currently we're dealing with the highest amount of Kickstarters ever, and if we're dealing with like some of the greatest amount of money in Kickstarter ever, then that means that it's cycling fast, right? If it's got that much content, it's going super fast, and you need to respect the fact that the consumer does not have as much time as you necessarily do. So that's been one of our biggest takeaways, is just learning how to properly condense information, both when it comes to our video previews, the body of Kickstarter content, how we handle our emails and our pre-marketing, and every part of it is just figuring out how to condense and basically respect the consumer's time.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, I think that's a great takeaway as well. And it's something that's very challenging to do. I think it was Hemingway or one famous writer who said that it's easier to write a long letter than a short letter. Actually, I think it was Mark Twain actually who said that one.
I was going to say, I think Hemingway said it's easier to write drunk and edit sober. That's the Hemingway.
That's probably Hemingway, yeah.
Remember, which is also valid advice.
Yeah, I think it was Mark
Basically,
Twain.
just eliminate the filter while you're being creative is, I think, great advice.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be done through drinking.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And where can people go to learn a little bit more about some of the new games you have coming out here?
So you can find us at deepwatergaming.com. Our handles on social media are Deepwater Games all around. So that's going to be Twitter and on Facebook and all that business.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. Really great tips, advice. Appreciate all of it. And good luck with the in-person meetups. I think that's going to be really cool, and look forward to seeing some of the new stuff that you have come out with.
Yeah, super excited. Thank you so much for having me, Salvador.
Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Again, my name is Salvador Briggman. One other announcement that I wanted to make here is, so I try to keep my personal life mainly out of these episodes because I know you guys are coming here just to learn and to get inspired and to get tactics and tips, but I also once in a while like to sprinkle in a little bit. So I decided to relocate to Miami. So I'm currently in Miami. Love New York City. I lived in New York for so many years, and it's great. It's incredible. It's amazing. Got family in Massachusetts, all that kind of stuff. But I really want to try a couple years at least in Florida and to kind of get to know that scene. So much cool stuff is happening here. There's a tech scene. It's really exciting. So if you're in Miami, love to reach out. You can always check me out on Instagram, Salvador Briggman. You can go and follow me there if you want to connect on something, or you're interested in coming on the podcast. We'd love to come, get in touch with you if you're interested in creating new products. You've done a successful Kickstarter or something like that. Would be really interesting. The other thing that I want to share here is that when it comes to doing one of these projects yourself or having someone else help you, I think the biggest thing is like navigating this whole crazy, wacky crowdfunding arena and trying to figure this out and try to do it in such a way that you end up ahead. You are successful. You're one of these success stories that I have on the show. And whenever we talk about this, I think that the thing that frustrates me so much is that just a large part of this process, as much as you try to talk about it and like educate about it and, ask important and interesting questions of guests, there's still so much of this iceberg, which is underwater. You think about an iceberg, right? The top of it, it's floating there. You can see the top, you can see a little bit of what's below the water, but there's a massive part that's just deep underneath that water. And just, if you've never done this before, it can be intimidating, my friend. It can be that uncertainty, that feeling of like, I don't know what's around the next bend. I don't know if this is right. I don't know if this strategy is going to work or not for my specific product category or the specific thing I'm trying to raise money for, or even, is this even the right step to do? There's so much uncertainty. And I hate that, man. I hate that. And for me in my own life, I think being able to tap into people who have experience, mentors, and something that's so important to me is just self-education, right? That has led me to just like find literally treasure troves in my own life and to be able to discover things. And you hear a lot of it as well on the show. Like you hear when I discover something new and I'm excited and curious about it, right? So that has been so important in my own life and in my own success. And to even be able to do things like do a podcast, do YouTube, write these books. I know I've written 10 books. I also came out with a recent one I haven't really talked about too much yet. And it's just been something that's been so cool for me. So I want to provide that experience for you. So if you're interested in getting a little bit more, I'd say, attention, having more insights, having that cutting edge resources that are, and those tactics that are still working today. If you've read a lot online, you're like, okay, I really just want to know how it works behind the scenes. And I really want you to just pull back the curtain and show me, talk with me for my specific category. I'm willing to invest in my own education. I've spent money obviously before on education. I've maybe gone to school, or I've gone to college, or I've gone through corporate training, or I've done any kind of training in my own life. And I'm like, I understand the value of experience. I understand the value of learning. And I am committed to that. I'm committed to doing that seriously. It could be for a month, it could be for 2 months, whatever it is, until this project gets launched. I want to do it right. I'm willing to invest in myself and also the success of this campaign. If that sounds like you, listen up to what I am about to mention. So first of all, I want to introduce you to this whole new secret crowdfunding community, which I am building. And it is so cool, man. It is so exciting. I am blown away by some of the students there, the people who are coming out with new products and new inventions and new things. And, it could even just be like, I was talking with someone the other day who's coming out with a really cool creative project. And, I'm just listening to them like, this is insane, man. You're like a freaking Da Vinci, right? And I'm not that person. Like, I'll write books and I do that kind of stuff. I'm not really like the whole inventor. But what I love doing is I love helping those people get attention and get noticed. And I do that by using my own superpower, right? Which is being able to really digest things very easily for you, to put together templates, checklists, things that you have to do in order to get launched, as well as introduce you to tactics, tools, resources, things that you're not going to discover anywhere else. And also occasionally helping out one-on-one, right? So what I'm going to be sharing with you is what I call like my crowdfunding mastermind. This is basically secret crowdfunding workshops that I put on regularly, as well as personalized one-on-one attention with me. You're going to get access to my entire exclusive private syllabus, where I basically have shared with you, and broken down every element of launching a new and up-and-coming Kickstarter campaign. It's exciting. It is really cool. You're not going to discover this stuff anywhere else. And if you want to learn more, you can go to this link and you can get some details there. You can go to crowdcrux.com/mastermind. That link is crux.com/mastermind, crowdcrux.com/mastermind. So that link will take you there. You can learn a little bit more. And if you are confident, if you are really ready to take a chance on yourself, if you want to try this out and you're like, Sal, I've really been learning a little bit from these episodes and I want to go a layer deeper. I want to find out what goes into one of these successful campaigns. You can go to that link and I promise you're going to have an incredible experience with that. I've had so many rave reviews, people who have said that this has just literally made the difference between them having success and them just kind of flailing around, not knowing how to do it. Like if you're trying to do something, let's just say you're trying to learn how to swim. You could be flailing in the water and try to figure it out yourself. And most often, if you were the first human being to try to swim, you're like, well, you can't do that, right? I'm flailing around here in the water. I don't think you can actually swim in this water. But if you just learn from a swim instructor, you know how to do it in record time. Same thing goes with learn how to do something like skiing or snowboarding, right? The first human being to try to ski was like maybe tried it out and they fell and they're like, well, this is a dumb idea, right? But then there's that one guy who just kept trying, and eventually he got a little bit of success. So this to me is like, you're trying to just speed up the process. You're trying to learn from someone who can help you get there A to Z with the coaching, with all of the tools and resources that I'm sharing with you, etc. So if that sounds interesting to you, go to this link, crowdcrux.com/mastermind. Would love to have you there. Thank you so much if you do, open up that door to that new window of opportunity. Would love to talk with you, and I'll see you next time.